Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kiana Canada, and this afternoon we are going to be delving into the Thomas Stofiel case. Now, if you haven't heard, Thomas Stofiel was a Jewish American who fled the United States and fled to the Republic of Ireland. Now, I'm going to be honest with you that I am not an expert in Thomas Stofiel's case. I don't have all the details. And I'm saying that because I personally feel that some of the details have been suppressed. Just a moment. Some of the details have been suppressed by the Republic of Ireland. So when I was in the Republic of Ireland, I tried to, if you've been following my story, and if you see on, I think on TikTok, that video is on TikTok, what I tried to do was I wrote for an inquest to find out more about uh, Thomas Stofiel's death. Um, and I'll just kind of give you a refresher about how this whole thing, how I found out about Thomas Stofiel and why I'm so interested in this particular case. So, when I was in the Republic of Ireland, I was being oppressed in direct provision by a group of asylum seekers that I personally feel were colluding with state actors to coercively repatriate me from the Republic of Ireland. And if you've been following my story, you understand that I am an American citizen. I was born in the United States and that I'm going through a practice known as transnational repression. Um, Commonly, transnational repression or yes, I'll use that word. Commonly, the practices of transnational repression are when a country reaches across its borders to silence the dissent of its citizens. This can be through extraordinary renditions, incommunicado detention, enforced disappearances, and in the most extreme cases, through unalivement. Now, I have discovered that states use soft tactics when putting citizens through transnational repression. The modalities of transnational repression are ever evolving, and it isn't only your nation. So, for example, if a person flees their nation, it's their nation putting them through transnational repression. No, other nations can put other citizens through, other nations can put foreign nationals through transnational repression as well. The evidence to support that argument is the Julian Assange case. So, what we seen was Julian Assange was an Australian citizen and he leaked some documents, and the United States actually put him through transnational repression. And I'll link that video in the description so that you can reference it. Uh, if you want to look at it, and so you can kind of understand that it is really not only like our own countries that are putting us through transnational repression, but it's also other foreign states that are doing it as well. And so when I was in the Republic of Ireland, I was being put through a practice that at first had the earmarks of morality policing, which in essence, that's exactly what it was morality policing. Um, and it was morality policing that was state sanctioned. So essentially, the state was sanctioning this behavior. The state was instructing these asylum seekers to put me through a practice of morality policing. And so, understanding that, right, my whole thought process was this is coercive repatriation. And if you followed my story, I disclosed that I spoke to um, a few people in positions of power, which was the Migrant Refugee Rights Center, and I said, "Hey, I'm being put through coercive repatriation. I think I need your help. Like I don't know why like this is happening, but this is something that's happening to me." And so NAS, they said that they didn't understand what that was. They didn't know anything about that. And so, ladies and gentlemen, when I before I had this conversation with NASC about coercive repatriation, I was already a student uh, doing a BA in law, and I was doing a lot of reading. So on my free time, I was reading, and plus I was doing a couple of postgraduate courses at the University College Cork. So I had access to the library. So I was reading a lot. And I found in a book that I was reading that it was talking about coercive repatriation. And so I found it odd that an organization that works with the rights of asylum seekers did not know what this practice was. And so they feigned ignorant and pretended they didn't understand what I was talking about, didn't know what I was talking about. And so the ill treatment continued. But before I actually revealed to NAS, the Migrant Refugee Rights Center, that I was going through coercive repatriation, before I even knew that that's what was a component of transnational repression, I had a conversation with two journalists. So I Googled independent journalists. So because I understood, I'm going to tell you my reasoning behind that. So I was already trying to get assistance from uh, establishment journalists in the Republic of Ireland, trying to get them to break the story on what I was going through, and none of them would touch it. So there was probably like a catching that story and killing that story, uh, working with the government in doing that, right? And so I tried to be strategic about it, and so I looked into, I Googled online independent journalist, and I forget the website that I went to, but a number of journalists came up, and there was this one journalist, his name was MostafaDarwish, and I think he's from Egypt. And I said, okay, perhaps like this journalist, I Googled his work, and I was like, okay, his work looks, it looks independent, it looks impartial. Perhaps he would be interested in covering my story. So I reached out to Mustafa Darwish, and I was like, "Hey, this is something that I'm experiencing and direct provision. I really want to see if you would cover this story." And he was like, "Yeah, I'll talk to you. I'll meet with you." And so I met with Mustafa Darwish, and no, he brought a very tall reporter with him. I think this reporter worked at the Irish Times. His name is MoelBaker. And so we met at there's a coffee shop that was not too far from the accommodation that I was staying at. I think it was called Costa Coffee. It was right across the street from a McDonald's. We met at that coffee shop, and I began to explain to them what I was experiencing and why I left the United States. And I'm not really sure if this was the United States that was engaging in this intimidation, but I thought that it was just, confined to the culprits within the direct provision institution. And so understanding that and having this discussion with Mustafa and Noel Baker, during our discussion, they brought up a person named Thomas Stofiel. So they were like, there was an American citizen that claimed asylum in the Republic of Ireland. His name is Thomas Stofiel. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. They were like, "Have you heard of him? Do you know anything about him?" And I was like, "No, I don't know who that is. Uh, don't know anything about him." And I didn't know anything about him, didn't know much about his story and why he fled the United States. And so they broke that story down to me, and they, uh, framed it, I wanna say, like, the framing of the story had to do with, like, Thomas Stofiel fled the United States, came to the Republic of Ireland, found himself in direct provision, and while he was in direct provision, he somehow was, no longer living, and, he had a couple of issues. And so those issues that they were bringing up is that Thomas Stofiel believed that there was an Armageddon coming, and that, what else did they say? They said that they said that he was like a prepper, so a person who prepared for, like, um, I guess, like, the end of days. And they never dix so it was it was never disclosed to me that Thomas Stofiel was Jewish. They didn't that wasn't never anything that was really disclosed to me. And so my understanding was that, Thomas Stofiel was just, this man who, fled the United States, came to the Republic of Ireland, somehow lost his life, and they were looking into the story. And so I'm not really sure. I'll have to go back into the articles and to look to see what the date was where he actually fled the United States. And I think the time that he lost his life was like before, like, I came to the Republic of Ireland. And so um, learning about that was, quite distressing for me to know that an American citizen was lost their life in the Republic of Ireland. And so they asked me, they were like, "Well, do you want to have your story connected to Thomas Stofiel's story?" And I was like, "Okay, so tell me more about what Thomas Stofiel, like what was his belief system?" And so that's when they told me, like, okay, like, the things that he believed in. And I was like, "No, I think what I'm going through is quite different. I'm a Black American, and, uh, you know, the injustice that I've experienced throughout my life has to do with racial discrimination and racial prejudice." And so they weren't bringing any of that up. They didn't disclose any of that, and so I didn't feel like my story was connecting with Thomas Stofiel's. And so I declined to actually be a part of that, uh, to have my story being put in that article. And after that, like, I became very curious about, Thomas Stofiel, and looked up his story, and learned that he was a Jewish American in the Republic of Ireland, that he stayed in direct provision institution, that he had a daughter that he cared about a lot. Um, that for some reason, like, the details are very vague and blurry about why he was being sought by the FBI. He was a person that was, I think he was somebody who was, uh, maybe conservative, because he was someone who believed in the Second Amendment. As you know, that is something I don't believe in. I'm an abolitionist. I, feel that the Second Amendment should be abolished, and I am anti-gun, but I think that Thomas Stofiel was. And so, it's unclear as to why he had fled the United States, in the first place. But before he fled, Thomas Stofiel was, um, it appeared as if Thomas Stofiel, it appeared as if he was, having a excuse me, a custody battle with perhaps his, child's mother. That's what, one can infer from reading the story that, like, there was a custody battle and, maybe he wanted to spend more time with his daughter, didn't get to spend enough time with his daughter, so he tried to take his daughter, uh, wherever he was going, and then the FBI I think what happened was the mother put out a kidnapping, uh, c complaint, or she filed a kidnapping case against Thomas Stofiel, and then that is how this whole thing came to being with the FBI looking, with the FBI looking for him. And so that's what I think what happened was that there was a custody battle between Thomas Stofiel and his ex-wife, and Thomas Stofiel wanted to spend more time with his children, or excuse me, his daughter, and sought to spend more time with his daughter, tried to take his daughter, uh, from the state, and then the mom filed a missing persons complaint, believing that her daughter was kidnapped. Thomas Stofiel had the daughter, and so the FBI was looking for Thomas Stofiel. From the stories, you can kind of understand that, Thomas Stofiel didn't appear to have any, he wasn't a fugitive from justice when he arrived in the Republic of Ireland, didn't have any serious criminality under his belt. He just arrived in the Republic of Ireland because he wanted to separate himself from the United States of America. And so there is, very few videos online about Thomas Stofiel. I think that once a person is unalived by either they unalive themselves or is unalived by the state, or something happens to them, what happens is the state decides to collect a lot of information on that person. So they take all their information offline, so their YouTube videos, their, um, social media accounts, etcetera. So Thomas Stofiel uh, did have a social media excuse me, he did have a YouTube account and he uploaded videos, but there was only very few videos that the United States allowed us to see. And of course, if you didn't know Thomas Stofiel in the beginning, you wouldn't really understand a lot about him from watching these videos. Now, in the videos, like, there is, some language that he uses, like he uses some homophobic language, which, I condemn. I'm not a person that is, um, condoning that kind of language. And so, uh, the snippet of the video that I see, uh is not getting a full depiction, a full story about what happened to Thomas Stofiel and his experiences. But what we can gather from those videos is that Thomas Stofiel was very connected to his faith, which was the Jewish faith, and he was very connected to religion. And so he found himself in the Republic of Ireland, decided to file a refuge, or, an international protection claim there, right? Reese's Pieces. So he filed an international protection claim in the Republic of Ireland, and he was housed at a accommodation center, right? So they housed him in an accommodation, and something. Okay, so just to give you some history, when you are an asylum seeker, if you're housed in the Republic of Ireland, if you're housed in, I guess, like within the European Union, right? They really can't put you out of your accommodation unless you really do something very serious, or unless you're under a deportation order. Now, with Thomas Stofiel, he was not under a deportation order at the time that he was pushed out of this accommodation center. So Thomas Stofiel had a roommate who was of a different faith. And this roommate made some allegations against Thomas Stofiel, which was probably, um, he was probably told to make those allegations against Thomas Stofiel. So those allegations were that Thomas Stofiel was somebody who was not perceiving events properly. And so the person who said that was not the person who made a sweeping allegation to say that all Americans that he had encountered were somehow, not perceiving events accurately, seemed to be suffering from a mental illness, which was a very sweeping allegation that they have published in the Irish Times. Okay, is this ASMR? No. And so I was taken aback by that because I was thinking, okay, Ireland, the Republic of Ireland and the United States, they're supposed to be allies. In the United States, is the United States allowing the Republic of Ireland to publish this kind of information about American citizens? Yeah, okay, United States, you don't want your citizens to file asylum, but is it appropriate for you to go to that extent to say that all Americans are suffering from a mental health condition? That seems quite discriminatory, and that seems to be like xenophobic, in my opinion. Um, I don't know. Okay. So afterwards, Thomas Stofiel, in my personal opinion, based on going through transnational repression, based on living in the Republic of Ireland, I am of the opinion that Thomas Stofiel was pushed out of out of that accommodation center, that there was a practice of transnational repression, that he was undergoing this practice of transnational repression, and that is what pushed him out of this accommodation center. Ladies and gentlemen, no person would leave a comfortable bed and 3 meals and go sleep outside far in the grassy knoll, unless something pushed them out of that accommodation. And this is essentially where Thomas Stofiel found himself. He was living in this accommodation. He had a comfortable place to sleep. He had his food and everything. And ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind that most people that were in the Republic of Ireland at the time that Thomas Stofiel was found, that his claim was found, like his international protection claim was rejected. Most people that were there and their claims were rejected as well, were not being deported. So it doesn't make any sense that Thomas Stofiel felt that he was going to be deported when a number of nationalities in the Republic of Ireland weren't being deported at that particular time. And in fact, it was, I think, during that period that Thomas Stofiel was in the Republic of Ireland that human rights, or excuse me, refugee and asylum groups were actually coming together to try and see if those people who received a deportation orders could be given leave to remain in the nation. So I think that Thomas Stofiel was pushed out of direct provision institution by some very powerful people, and found himself, what he thought was a safe place within the woods. And so what happened then was that Thomas Stofiel was sleeping out there. There's no indication about how long Thomas Stofiel was sleeping out there. Like, was this his first day out there? There's no reporting on that. Whether like this happened the day that he left or whether this happened several days later. All we know is that what happened was that Thomas Stofiel was outside, had decided to leave direct provision. Something pushed him out of direct provision. He found himself sleeping outside, uh, and the reporting is alleging that Thomas Stofiel took his own life. Now, I disagree. I don't think that that is what happened, and so I to learn more about it, what I did when I was in the Republic of Ireland is I actually uh, filed for an inquest. And so, if you understand the law allows any interested parties of the deceased to attend an inquest. You don't have to be a family member. You could be somebody who is similarly situated. So Thomas Stofiel is American. I'm an American. Um, Thomas Stofiel, uh, uh, is an asylum seeker. I'm an asylum seeker, so that puts me that the fact that he was unalived in this nation and was going through something very serious was of interest to me, and I should have been able to attend that inquest, but they rejected, my request, and after they rejected my request, or so this is what happened. I put in for the inquest, so I tried to get legal aid for the inquest to look into Thomas Stofiel's death. And then after I put in for legal aid, I received more intimidation from the state while I was in direct provision. So because that intimidation increased, what I did was I actually removed that inquest. So I said, okay, I'm canceling this inquest. I don't want to look into it. And so instead of like saying, okay, she's canceling the inquest, we don't, she doesn't want to look into it. Basically, they made it to where like they had one up on me, right? So despite the fact that I wrote in and said, I'm withdrawing this inquest, I don't want to look further into it, their response to me was, we're rejecting uh, your request to look into this unalivement in Republic of Ireland. So you kind of see it's always they have to be one up on you. So to reiterate, I was a person who decided to withdraw the inquest. I didn't want to look further into it because I was being intimidated. Yet they responded to that by saying, we are rejecting your request to look into this inquest, or excuse me, to look into this unalivement. And so they were trying to say that like I didn't have standing because I wasn't a family member. But again, you don't have to be a family member to launch an inquest. You just only need to be, in the eyes of the law, an interested party. And so that was what made me back away from that. You can kind of, I think that that video is still uploaded somewhere on my TikTok account where I talk about that I'm actually deciding not to actually move forward with that inquest. And so after all that happened, the intimidation against me increased and increased. And then I had um, started to do some interviews when I was in the Republic of Ireland. So I was going around speaking to uh, people that I would often run in contact with and ask them about Thomas Stofiel. If they knew Thomas Stofiel, I would ask asylum seekers in direct provision if they knew anything about Thomas Stofiel. Like, has anything like what happened to Thomas Stofiel, has that happened to anyone else? And ladies and gentlemen, you have to keep in mind that this was during a period where there were a lot of instances of asylum seekers that were coming up unalived in direct provision. And yet, asylum organizations, they all advocated for all these other people, but they did not advocate for Thomas Stofiel. And I believe the reason why they didn't advocate for Thomas Stofiel, one, is because they actually knew what happened to him. And two, Thomas Stofiel had a mark against him that was uh, incongruent to the Republic of Ireland. Thomas Stofiel was Jewish, and there is an inconsistency that has been happening within the Republic of Ireland between the Republic of Ireland and Jewish people. I think that that was happening for quite some time, and that relationship was severed, recently. But it raises a question, like, okay, like, was this um, a pogrom that happened to Thomas Stofiel? Uh, like, what was this? Who did this? What happened? Right? Just a moment. And so I tried to look further and further into this particular case, and was being blocked at every turn. And so I think this is what uh, what people were starting to. Uh, People were formulating their opinion that I was coming to Ireland to do research or to spy, which I wasn't doing. I was just very curious. I was just very curious about what was happening to a fellow asylum seeker, a fellow American. I wanted to know, like, how did this happen? Like, how did somebody who actually how did somebody who was who okay, so this is what I was thinking. How did somebody who fled their nation to a country that was supposed to keep them safe, how did they end up unalived, and why did that happen? And so I'm still concerned about it today, still concerned about, like, what happened, and the recent rift between the Republic of Ireland and Israel hasn't made things easier, and makes me even more afraid of what happened to Thomas Stofiel. And so, yeah. And so, if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this and you know of anything that happened, if you saw anything, if you were present, if you if there's something that's a piece of the puzzle that's not being published online, if there's something that you saw, something that please share it with me. Please share it. I am really looking into this. I really want to know more about what happened to Thomas. Now, I understand that Thomas has a different ideology than me. Again, I don't believe that there is an Armageddon coming. I don't believe in being a prepper. Uh, although I am in solidarity with the Jewish people, I'm not Jewish myself, but have created strong bonds with Jewish people and care for Jewish people a lot. Um, And so, with that said, like, I really want to know exactly what happened to Thomas Stofiel. Really want to know if anybody knows anything about, his unalivement in the Republic of Ireland. And if you know anything, please share it with me. Like, I am going to be following this story. I don't think that we know all that there is to know about this particular story. And it's worth looking further into, looking more deeply into. And there you have it. My name is Kiana Canada. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel or like this video. You can also follow me on Facebook. My Facebook account is linked in the description of this video. And not only that, you can actually read some of the articles that I publish on Medium. My articles are more about public statements and protecting the right to life, protecting human rights. And if you are interested in looking at any of those articles, you can go over there to Medium. My Medium account is also linked in the description of my YouTube account. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.